Today, we're digging into one of history's biggest what-ifs, the League of Nations. It was meant to be the world's answer to endless war, the first real attempt at getting everyone to work together. But did this grand idea ever really have a chance? Let's get into it. To really get the League, you have to picture the world in 1918. Empires had crumbled, millions were dead, the so-called Great War was over, and everyone was asking this one massive question. This wasn't just some political puzzle. It was a desperate plea to make sure nothing like that could ever happen again.
And the answer they came up with? Well, it was totally radical. Instead of secret alliances and military buildups, they imagined a world where peace was the default, all thanks to international cooperation.
Yeah, the League of Nations wasn't just some high-minded idea cooked up in a quiet room. It was born directly from the mud and the horror of World War I. It was written right into the Treaty of Versailles, the same treaty that officially ended the war. Its whole reason for being was to be a permanent roadblock to another global catastrophe.
Now, the big idea holding it all together was something called collective security. Think of it like a global neighborhood watch. If a bully picks on one country, everyone else on the block steps in together. It's all for one and one for all, but for nations. An absolutely revolutionary concept for its time.
Okay, so that's the dream. But what about the reality? How is this thing actually supposed to work? Let's pop the hood and look at the mechanics.
The structure was kind of like a global government, right? You had the Assembly, which was like a parliament for all the member countries. Then you had the Council, a smaller, more powerful group that handled the big problems. And the Secretariat was the civil service, the engine room that kept the whole machine running day to day.
But here's the catch. And oh, what a catch it was. For the powerful council to do anything at all, the vote had to be unanimous. Every single member had to agree. I mean, can you imagine? Getting a room full of world powers to agree on what to have for lunch is hard enough, let alone how to stop a war. This one rule was a ticking time bomb.
The League's entire strategy was based on a few, well, let's call them optimistic assumptions from World War I. First, they figured it would always be super obvious who the bad guy was. Second, they truly believed that countries would choose to follow international law instead of just using brute force. And third, they built in a 3-month cooling-off period for any argument, assuming everyone would just patiently wait it out.
So, yeah, about those assumptions. It turns out reality was about to come knocking. The League had some serious design flaws from day one.
And this was probably the biggest flaw of all. It's kind of hard to run a club of the world when some of the biggest players don't even join. The most famous no-show? The United States. Even though their own president, Woodrow Wilson, championed the idea, the U.S. Senate said no thanks, and America stayed home.
And it wasn't just the U.S. Defeated Germany wasn't allowed in at first. The revolutionary Soviet Union didn't join for years. So what you had was less of a world league and more of a European one. And when it came time to actually enforce the rules, who did that leave? Pretty much just Britain and France, who were exhausted from the war and soon to be slammed by the Great Depression.
Okay, I know it sounds like this whole thing was a total disaster from the start, but hold on. That's not the whole story. The League actually had some wins.
It turns out the League was a pretty decent referee. For the smaller games, it successfully stepped in and settled over 30 different arguments, like a border dispute between Greece and Bulgaria. So the system could work, but mainly when dealing with smaller countries that were willing to sit down and talk things out.
And here's something you might not know. The League also managed something called the mandate system. Basically, it took over the old colonies of the defeated empires and was supposed to guide them towards independence. In a way, it was the very first tentative step towards decolonization on a global scale.
So the League was good at putting out small fires, but the real test wasn't going to be a small squabble over a border. No, a hurricane was brewing, one started by major world powers who couldn't care less about the rulebook. And that was the test that would change everything.
And then came the 1930s. This is the decade where every single one of those cracks in the foundation we talked about were ripped wide open. This is where it all falls apart.
One after another, the dominoes fell. 1931, Japan invades Manchuria. The League condemns it and does nothing. 1935, Italy invades Ethiopia. The League issues some sanctions that don't work. And then, from 1936 on, Germany starts breaking every rule in the book. And each time, the League was totally helpless.
And really, this quote just says it all. The League was built for a world of debate and reason. It was trying to bring a rule book to a knife fight.
It simply had no answer for a new kind of politics that saw war not as a last resort, but as a glorious goal. It was, in a word, impotent.
The dream was over. But here's the thing about spectacular failures. They often teach the most valuable lessons.
The irony is just incredible. The League of Nations was officially shut down in 1946, right after the end of World War II, the very war it was created to prevent. The great experiment had officially failed.
But its ghost is still with us, because when the world tried again, they studied every single thing that went wrong. The United Nations is, in many ways, the League 2.0. It was designed specifically to fix the League's biggest bugs, like giving its Security Council actual military teeth. So in the end, the League was a beautiful, flawed, maybe even naive first draft, an answer to that impossible question, how do you stop war for good? And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? After everything we've learned, with the UN and all our modern tools, are we actually any closer to finding the final answer?